War Machine's jetpack was probably the most hated item in Fortnite history. And to be fair, it's a really interesting concept, but it was executed so horribly that it ruined the majority of the season that it was in. And this leads to the million-dollar question. Why was it so bad? Now, a bit of backtracking to get there first. There's two types of mobility items in Fortnite, and two design philosophies. You have burst, and you have sustain. Sustained mobility items are pretty straightforward. You have a meter of some kind, a cooldown or something like that, and when you use it, it gets you a longer distance while taking from that meter or that cooldown, whatever. Great example, cars with the gas and all that stuff. On the other side of the spectrum, you have burst mobility, which is a limited resource that gets you a quick distance, not a long distance, but a quick distance. And that's things like shockwaves or dashes, right? Limited resource, quick movement. Now, the issue with the jetpack was that Epic tried to do both things. You had a meter for sustained mobility, but you had dashes, like burst mobility, that took from the meter instead of a limited resource, which meant that you could both sustain mobility and burst mobility at the same time. And those didn't really mix very well, which was pretty easy to tell if you played against it that season. And that's also at the same time why every single attempt they made to balance it failed miserably, because they weren't actually addressing the problem that they were dealing with in the first place. So, fixing it's pretty straightforward on the bright side, though. All you gotta do is give it a meter that it uses for standard flight, and 3 charges for boosting, and every boost consumes a little bit of the flight meter on the side. And that's just simple as that. But this is a great segue into the overall topic of how Epic balances weird or niche items. Like, for example, let's look at the Typhoon Blade, the most recent melee weapon in the game. It's kind of basic spammy, it's got a neat little alt fire, but it doesn't do much beyond that. The interesting thing about it is that they decided to balance it out by giving it, like, a durability meter. Because everybody loved those. Remember Breath of the Wild? People, that was like the number one praise that people had for the game. It was like, oh boy, I love the durability meter. The issue with it in this case, and that's kind of like the more fundamental issue with this idea for balancing it, like melee weapons, is the fact that the durability encourages you not to use it. But its intended function is to be used in combat. So am I supposed to use it for fighting, or am I supposed to just not use it? Is it like a display piece? Do I put it on my wall like an elk's head or a nice painting? I don't know, honestly. And I'll tell you right now, somebody who has spent time trying to actually use, just melee weapons in this current season, you use it for a bit, and then you pray to God that every single time you kill someone, they have a Typhoon Blade you can steal. Because if they don't, you're kind of just fucked. And the annoying thing is they've gone back and they've been, messing with previous melee weapons that didn't need that change either. A great example being the other blade, Katana, the dashy fancy one from the fancy Mega City season. That one was already pretty fine on its own. Bit annoying as a mobility item, but it didn't need durability, let alone as aggressive of a durability meter, like mechanic as it has, where you can use it like 3, you use like all 3 charges and you're down like most of the durability on the weapon. It's insane. But there's a lot of interesting discussions that can come out of this about how Epic balances these things on a base design philosophy, standpoint. Here's the most obvious kind of way you can look at it first. Epic doesn't really have any idea what they're doing. I think that's a pretty safe comparison, and it's gotten to the point where it looks like every time they get it right was just them getting lucky. They didn't trip themselves in the process. Because, the great example being one of the last 2 melee weapons we had, the kinetic claws, which were just fantastic. I mean, I've made a 15-minute video going over those, so there's a lot there in depth-wise, and they're just really well-designed melee weapons. But then they went to the Typhoon Blade, which was kind of the same old, spam one button, maybe do a fancy little gimmicky thing with the alt fire, but no actual overall meshing, no design, no core design philosophy that makes it interesting. It's just, here's a flashy set of attacks, here's a cool slash thing that you can do. How did the two tie together? Did damage? More damage, I guess? You can knock someone off a cliff, which is neat. And that's kind of like all wraps back around into them just not knowing what they're doing with weird stuff. You got the jetpack, which was a really weird, interesting idea that they just didn't know what they were doing with it, so they messed it up horribly. You have melee weapons that are weird and strange compared in the blend of first-person shooters, and they just don't know what they're doing with those because they're so wildly inconsistent quality-wise. And when they try to be interesting, it either works really well or it fails miserably, but it kind of mostly fails miserably, and it's weird. Uh, and I mean, if we're talking about the most recent stuff too, here's a fun little side note. You can actually, the grapple blade is going to come back next season. You know how I know this? So that's a durability bar. So there goes another thing that people liked, ruined for pointless reasons because Epic doesn't know what they're doing. Like, here's a great example, because I'm sure there are people thinking, alright, how would you do it, smart guy? And I'll tell you how I'd do it, smart me. Stamina cost. You have a stamina meter, use it. Like, if every slash the Typhoon Blade cost a chunk of your stamina, it'd be so much more balanced on that note because you'd have to actually think about how you use it. You wouldn't be able to just run at someone and then spam it all over the place. You'd have to think, you'd have to analyze the situation, and you'd have to respond accordingly. Think player, think what are you doing wasting all your stamina running at me and then standing there awkwardly like you can't attack. That's not what happens. That could be what happens, but it's not. Because Epic, for some reason, the most obvious solution, the Occam's razor to fix the balancing, is just not present for them. And I don't know what the deal with that is. So yeah, this was kind of a tirade, rant, whatever, about how Epic doesn't know what they're doing with balancing and kind of just, just shits the bed like all the time. But I mean, like, it sucks, man, because I'm the kind of person where I like these sorts of alternate playstyles. I like when a game has these weird different methods of going at combat or whatever besides just the main stuff. It makes the game more diverse, more unique overall. And it really sucks to see that Epic wants to get this, but they can't. And it's not like it's like super hard to do either. Like, here's a fantastic example. The Typhoon Blade very early on had a tech called Juju, which I helped pioneer. Not to toot my own horn, but and it was really cool. The way it worked essentially, you would jump, do an air attack, and then when you hit the ground, you would hold a crouch and you would slide, right? So you basically slide out of an air attack, which you could then combo into other moves. And there were like combo trees, combo paths, combo chains. It was crazy the stuff you could do with this. And it made the weapon really fun and very dynamic. There's a lot of thought you had to put into how you used it, but most importantly, it was fun to watch. Because here's the thing, right? Something, you can kind of gauge the quality of an item based on how fun it is to use and how fun it is to watch in action, right? You have two shotguns, right? And they're fun to use. Say the Oni shotgun, right? It's fun to use. And when you watch two people going at it, when you watch somebody using it in combat, it's pretty fun to watch because it's like, it's just cool to see someone like hit crazy flicks and crazy shots and all that stuff with it. Typhoon Blade doesn't have that. That's all you do is just run at the other person and press one button, maybe jump away and then use your alt fire if you're taking damage. But I mean, it's boring. And that's how it is both to use and to see it get used. And that's kind of the marker that I think that I think Epic needs to really hit to tell if they've actually done a good job or not. Is this thing fun to fight with / against, and is this thing fun to watch a fight of? Like, you look at a fighting game, right? Like, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, whatever. Those are all pretty melee-heavy games. And do you think people would watch those if you just mashed one button over and over and that was the entire fight? Do you think people would play those? No. That's why melee weapons don't get used as melee weapons in this game. That's why they get used for their mobility-related gimmicks. And you know what I want? Epic. This is a challenge for you directly, Epic. I want you guys to make a melee weapon. And I want that melee weapon to have no mobility-related stuff. I don't want to see any, special jumps, any special sprints, any dashes, nothing like that. Not unless it's like really short range and meant for combat, like a dodge roll, right? I don't want to see any mobility with this. Like, anything you can actually use for mobility. I want to fucking hell. I want to see. Oh, yeah, there we go. I want to see this weapon be a weapon, not a fun gimmick tool. If you can do that, even if you don't hit the nail on the head with the actual mechanics of it on the first try, I think that just sticking with that will automatically help you be in a better spot to make these interesting melee weapons. And it's sad too. Man, I could rant about this for so long, but you guys were so close when you had the kinetic claws. You were so good. Those were actually really fun to use. Those were fantastic weapons. They were fun to watch in action. They were fun to use. I mean, having one used against you if they didn't know what they were doing was just kind of like, oh, free kill. But having used against you if they knew what they were doing was kind of a nightmare because it was crazy. But that's how that kind of skill expression thing works, you know? So, I want to see a melee weapon that is at the quality the kinetic claws hit. That's my challenge to you. And the way that I think you start by doing that is by not making them have mobility functionality. Don't make them have two things in one. Don't make them two things in one. Make them one thing. Make them one thing. Simple as that. So this was my lightly scripted, kind of nutty rant. I'm gonna be so honest. I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of felt like doing this. Alright, well, toodles.